Hey patrons, welcome to January's Q&A video, January 2024. Happy 2024. Happy New Year. I hope all of you are having a great new year. I'm going to apologize in advance if you catch me. I'll try and edit around it, but if you catch me coughing or clearing my throat in this video, I am getting over like a little residual chest thing, cough. So apologies for that in advance. We're gonna get into some questions because you guys had questions and some of you enjoy that kind of thing. So let's dive in with Bram. Starts off by asking or stating and then asking, I've recently seen that there's an option to pledge for a full year. I was wondering what is the more profitable formula for you, monthly or yearly pledges? Well, obviously, I offer a discount if somebody pledges for a year. So technically, that's less money. However, when someone pledges for a year, that's a year of support that I know I've gotten. Like that's there's stability in that for somebody who does what I do for a living has a value that cannot be understated. So in terms of like strictly like purely dollar amount, obviously doing the monthly pledges without the discount equates to a little bit more money. But still, pledging yearly is for you guys, if you choose to do that, convenient, um, saves a little bit of money. And for me, it helps me know, like, okay, like I've gotten, a year of support from that person. Just like, boom, one shot. Like, I know it, like, and so it just helps with little things. Like imagine if every single Patreon did the yearly support thing, right? And like it all and this will never happen in the history of anything ever, but imagine if everybody pledged yearly and they all charged on the same day. It would be like boom, in one shot I know what my Patreon income is for that year. And then I can like I can plan it. I can divide that up into 12 months or whatever. Here's for mortgage, here's for like there's a there's a stability to that a lot of people I think take for granted with jobs that are sort of like I work X number of hours and I get paid X number of dollars for those hours. And um, there's being able to plan that a lot like on your income to a degree, obviously, that a lot of people get to do that you don't get to do when your whole job is basically like I'm making stuff and I hope people pay me for it. So yeah, so there's value in the yearly pledges that's not necessarily quantified by a dollar amount. I'm good with either. I mean, honestly, it's either is fine with me. I wouldn't offer the yearly pledges if I wasn't. Paul asks, do you have more ideas for storylines for Analog and Dependent Starcaster than you can actually do? Or do you sometimes have to spend more time coming up with storylines? I assume that the drawing takes up most of your time. Just curious how much of your time is thinking of the story and plot. That's an interesting question. So to let me break this down into sections. Do I have more storyline ideas than I can actually do? 100%. Absolutely. I have way more, like, in various degrees, mind you, of completion. Some are like, oh, I know exactly like this how I want this story to start and end, and this is going to be a fun thing. And others are more like a little nebulous, sort of like the like beginnings, inklings of an idea for a thing that would need to be fleshed out more. But absolutely, I have ideas for years. If I was really to map them out, um, plenty of ideas for this spin-offs, things that and a lot of it's like, well, this is a thing I want to do, but like I need to find like the storyline isn't ready for it yet, so we need to get further down the road, and then I can weave that in, and where does this slot into that? So, 100%. As far as just general ideas, fortunately, I have way more ideas than I have time, which, trust me, is its own cute brand of frustration. With that said, though, I do then have to take those ideas at points and flesh them out into actual scripts, into concrete things that I'm going to do, which takes some time. Uh, and then the assumption that drawing takes up most of your time, um, yes and no. Like drawing takes up an amount of time, but it is mostly mechanics. It is mostly like just the act of doing. Um, and so while it takes up a good amount of time, it's like once I know what I'm doing, it's really just a matter of sitting down, pencil to paper, one panel after another, one step after another, and it's done. Whereas writing the storylines and the scripts and the jokes and all the little things is not necessarily as neat a process, in that sometimes I sit down and I'm like, what's an idea? And it's like boom, 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 like this, and it just kind of flows out. And then other times I'm like, what's an idea? And I stare at the ceiling for like half an hour and I'm like, I have no idea. Like what, like, or like I keep in my mind like I'm trying to break a story, like, and it's just you're like, it's like hitting your head against a brick wall until finally, because you're like, well, what if this? And then like, what if this? No, that's the same thing. What if this? And then finally you're like, oh wait. So that the story bit, the writing bit is the part that can be harder to nail down in terms of like how long is. There have definitely been days where I'm like, I sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna let me write a few scripts, and then I'll pivot and I'll do my Patreon wallpaper and this and that. And I sit down and like the whole day turns into a just writing day, because it's like pulling teeth. And um so you never know. You know what I mean? Like you never know. Some days are easier than others. Some ideas you really have to like, you're like, I know there's something there, but uh it's not readily formed, and you kind of got to hammer it and find you got to find the edges of it. And other times it like, I'll be falling asleep at night and like right before I drift off, I'm like, oh boom, that's a great idea. And it's all fully formed and whatever. So um yes, I have more storylines than I have time to write and draw. And also I do sometimes have to take a day or two to just like map out and kind of uh, you know turn these nebulous ideas into a reality. All right, real quick. Convict asks, when someone guesses a major upcoming plot point, do you stick with it or change it in any way? Yeah. So I mean, look, it's a bummer when someone. I mean, it depends. Like, I do love like when I get to surprise people, like when it's like, oh, I didn't see that coming, or like there's a reveal or something like that. Obviously, I like that, but the reality is, like, I'm telling a story one page at a time, with often a day between pages. Like that same story, like if it was just in a book and you're flipping pages, you finish one page, you immediately flip to the next page. You're not giving your brain a whole lot of time to sit there and like extrapolate on what could happen next. But when there's a day or two between pages, obviously people can sit in the comments and throw out every possible permutation of what might happen, every uh, alternate universe, like, well, if this branches off and this could happen and this could happen. And so the bottom line is, sometimes it's possible somebody's gonna guess on the right thing. Someone's gonna like, of like, in 100 guesses, of like what happens next, someone might land pretty close. And I cannot realistically just go like changing everything I've written every time that happens, because when I write something, it's for a reason. Like, I want to get to, uh, like, you get from point A to point B, but often point B is necessary to then get to point C and D. So like, um, as much as I love getting to like come up with something that nobody sees coming and nobody can guess, you know, if it does happen, it's like, well, that's okay, fine. It is what it is, and it's the story, and then we move on to the next thing, and it's more about building the bigger picture than each individual little plot point and reveal. And even honestly, even when I do something that people maybe see coming, it's always my hope that I've done it in at least an interesting way. That it's maybe the thing happened, but it happened with a slight twist on it that that you didn't see coming. So it's just part of what it is. But no, I mean I can't keep. I would be I would be all over the map if I was trying to change things every time someone landed close on a guess. Michael asks, "Do I currently have a group to play D&D or any other tabletop RPG system with?" And the answer to that is no. I do not currently. My life is just not at the moment conducive to to that kind of commitment. So unfortunately, at the moment, I'm not playing any tabletop RPGs. And finally, Felix wants to know how large of a scale are you planning for the new first year story? He's referring to Analog and D-Pad Year One, which will be launching soon. Um, is it going to be a short story just in that year, or is it going to span out to a larger story with more backstory? So to try and answer this, basically, Analog and D-Pad Year One, the concept for that is what took place during that first year from so like when we met Ethan and Lucas at the beginning of the reboot, at the beginning of Analog and D-Pad, they had been superheroes for like a little over a year. So what took place between that night that they got their superpowers and when we first really met them and they were already kind of in full swing of doing the superhero thing. I always felt like I wanted to get right into the story, um, and pepper in some of the important details through dialogue and flashbacks. But I always felt like there's still some fun stuff that could have taken place in that first year. Um, and the bottom line is, and this kind of throws back to um, Paul's question, which was, I have so many ideas and not enough time to tell them all, to do them all, that I tend to have to pick and choose. And so um, I haven't gotten to do as much flashback to that first year as I would like. There's just no organic place to put a lot of it in, um, which leads us to Analog and D-Pad Year One, which will be a Patreon exclusive, ongoing / limited series um, that tells that time frame. So it does a couple of things. It lets me do a story for patrons, which I'm excited about. It lets me fill in that year of like and like all the fun stuff that's involved with that. Like, how did they like? What were their first costumes like? How did they make their costumes? How did they determine like their? How did they decide on their names and learning how to be a superhero and like what's that like and what kind of stuff did they encounter and all of the questions that might arise from like, hey, we just got superpowers, let's try and do something with them, um, in a fun Ethan and Lucas kind of a way. So so the concept for the story is that first year. So that obviously makes it, in some aspects, a limited story. It can't just go on indefinitely because at some point chronologically we're going to meet up with stuff we've already done. So there is something of a limit to the series. But with that said, there's a lot that I can do within that year, especially when like one conversation might take 3 or 4 pages. So it might take us a few years to actually tell this story. It's hard to say. I will say that I have before, and this was important for like my sanity, my schedule, my stress level, all of that. Um, Before this even launches, I will have finished writing the scripts for at least a year worth, and I will have finished actually drawing or like started drawing the comics for at least 6 months work. It's really important to me to be ahead on this in order to be able to do it and not feel like I'm adding a lot of crunch to my already fairly crunched schedule. So once it launches, I expect it to go on for a little while. you know, in order to make sure that I'm telling all those stories within that year that I want to tell. But then there is at some point it will end because it'll be finished, and then perhaps we will find something else to fill that time with. All right, that is enough questions for this video. Thank you all so much for your continued support. I love you guys. I hope your January was awesome. I hope February is pretty cool too, and we will do another one of these, you know, at some point.